Well, good morning, Tranium friends. I'm Pastor Sue, and this is Patio Ponderings for the week. It's been a while since I've actually been outside on a patio. Not fond of doing that in below zero weather, so I hope you'll forgive me for being inside one more week. This week we are in the youth room in the church, and this is a place where our kids of all ages gather on a regular basis, where we learn together and where we hope to pass down faith to the youngest in our community, so that they will learn to be followers of Jesus. And that is what I've been thinking about with our story from Sunday, is this idea of being a follower of Jesus, or as it's referred to in our story, discipleship. And what does it mean to be a disciple? Now, the story that we heard on Sunday is actually a pretty well-known story. It is the story of Jesus turning large amounts of water into the best tasting wine at the wedding of Cana. And at first glance, it doesn't seem like this is a story about discipleship at all. But there's a few clues that there is something we are to learn about discipleship from it. So the first clue that we have is that this is Jesus' first miracle. He does this right after he calls the disciples, and they are very newly acquainted as disciples and teacher. So that's all in the background as we go into the story. And in the first verses of this story, we hear that the disciples are present. The writer is making note of that, and the story concludes with the disciples. And this is the verse that we read at the end. It says, Jesus revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now, if you've been with me for a while, you know that when we talk about belief in the Gospel of John, we are talking about a relationship. But the word belief in the Greek can also mean to trust. And so to trust Jesus as a disciple is not just about trusting in Jesus' words and Jesus' actions. It is also to trust in the call that Jesus places on us. It is also to trust Jesus in following through with the actions we are called to take in his name. Okay? And I think this is underscored by the servants in this story. I think this is really where this bubbles up in the middle of the story, is Jesus' mother tells the servants to do whatever Jesus tells them to do. So she's trusting in him and what he's going to do, and she's asking the servants to do that along with her. And they do. Jesus involves them in this miracle and asks them to fill these stone jars with water, and they do what he tells them to do. They trust in him, and without knowing exactly what the outcome is going to be, right? So discipleship has to do with trusting that we can take these actions that Jesus is asking us to take. Now, later in John, Jesus will define discipleship for the disciples. Towards the end of his ministry, Jesus will define discipleship as this. He tells them to love each other just as I have loved you. This is how everyone will know that you are my disciple. This is the mark of being a follower of Jesus, is our love for neighbor. Trusting in that can be a challenge. The times that we are living in are incredibly challenging right now, especially for us in Minnesota. We are in the midst of public turmoil and violence and fear It is an incredibly challenging time. This is when it can feel hard to trust that God's call on us to just love our neighbor is really the way forward. But we use Jesus' example in his ministry as our inspiration to do just that. Through all of the Gospel of John, the disciples have witnessed Jesus loving the people and what that means. And so now that we are at the end of his ministry and we get this definition of discipleship as love, they know what to do and we know what to do too. We know this is about loving our neighbor, whoever our neighbor is. That means we are loving our poor neighbor, our hungry neighbor. We are loving the neighbor that is an outsider. We are loving the neighbor that is a stranger or an immigrant among us. We are loving the neighbor that is a widow or the neighbor that is in prison. It is a tough call, but we can trust. We can trust in Jesus that this truly is the way forward for us, not just as individuals, but especially for us as people together, that when we go forth together to love each other and to love our neighbor, whoever our neighbor is, that is the way forward. That is the path that we are called to take. And we can trust in that path, even when it feels hard, when it feels uncertain, when it doesn't even feel like it makes sense. Oh, dear friends, I continue to pray for us and pray for the people in Minnesota that we can find a way through this without further bloodshed, that we can find a way toward real peace. I hope you will join me in those prayers. And as always, I would love to hear what you have to say. Warmer air is coming. Hang with it, and we will see you on Sunday. Bye.